The Florida Gators brought some massive juice to their 2026 recruiting class with 3 commits this weekend.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, just go Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. And the Florida Gators added 3 commits this weekend. Huge. 1 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, none on Sunday, but don't fret about that. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But the first commit was Carson Baker on Friday night, running back. He's a 4-star on every service. And this is a guy that we spoke about, and we've spoken about this extensively in the past month, really. Where Florida wasn't in his top 5. He took his OV to Florida. And then from the moment he took his official visit to Florida, it felt very much like Florida was in the driver's seat for this whole recruitment, for the rest of the recruitment, and for the actual commitment itself. He took an official visit to Florida State last week, took an unofficial visit to Florida this weekend, committed on Friday. By the way, was supposed to be gone on Saturday, ended up coming back for more hype on Sunday, helping out the recruiting class. But another interesting note about this recruitment is that many people, after the Florida State official visit, many people started thinking, oh, wait, Florida State could be the number 2 one. They could be the number 2 school there. And then after the commitment said South Carolina was his number 2 school. So while we had Florida State fans on Twitter talk about, we're going to take Carson Baker, weren't even in the top 2, you big dummies. A running back with Aiden Mizell, speed, by the way, same 100-meter time as Aiden Mizell. And the scouting report is coming tomorrow. I left this up to the Locked On Gators insiders. I sent the text yesterday about if they would prefer a weekend recap today and scouting reports later, or flip it around with scouting reports today, weekend recap later, and overwhelmingly chose recap today. Scouting reports might be weird because, like I said, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but Florida could be adding 1 or 2 names to their recruiting class today. So that would be huge and would probably throw off the scouting report aspect of this, but the Florida Gators could add more. Scouting reports will be Kekua Omua, Carson Baker, and Marquez Daniel. Those will be that'll be the episode of the scouting report. And who's Marquez Daniel? Well, he's a 4-star wide receiver that committed to the Florida Gators. He's listed as 6'5" or 6'6", depending on where you look. But either way, he's someone that's going to be able to start competing for snaps as an X receiver right away. He committed on Saturday morning, and it's funny. On Friday afternoon, we got reports about Florida might be getting a commit today. And I had Friday night plans thinking I was safe. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to pre-record a show thinking that it would be Carson Baker or Jalen McCoy. And then someone was like, yeah, it might actually be Marquez Daniel. And so it was just a mess. And it was like, well, if Marquez is going to commit Friday, Saturday, whenever, but ended up being Saturday morning, bright and early, committed to the Florida Gators. And this one came down to Florida and Auburn, and he said that he's not going to take another official visit to Auburn. When we spoke about Marquez Daniel on Friday's episode, we spoke about how he took an official visit to Auburn last week, and he didn't commit to Auburn. And so for Florida, that to me told me that Florida might be in the driver's seat here, or is at least close enough in second where an official visit to Auburn did not get him to flip to or did not get him to commit to Florida. And then he's in Gainesville for not even 24 hours and he commits to Florida. So I think we know who was really in the driver's seat that whole time as well. And it wasn't Auburn. Defensive lineman Jalen McCoy also committed to the Florida Gators on Saturday. He is the only 3-4-5. Don't forget that. 3-star on 1 service, 4-star on 2 service, 5-star on 1 service. If I'm not mistaken, it's 3-star on 24/7, 5-star on ESPN, 4-star on On3 and Rivals. And he's a huge part of the defensive line class that I know that there wasn't, I think many of us expected a commit to pop yesterday. I know I did, but it didn't happen. And I still think that this defensive line class is going to be a haul. We'll see who leaves, who joins, but Jalen McCoy is the headliner for it right now. And he'd be the headliner for most guys. I think that there are even players that could be ranked higher than him, that if they commit to Florida, I'd still consider him the better player. Again, I don't give a damn about your rankings. I bring them up just because it's interesting to keep track of and make note of. But Jalen McCoy is a huge defensive line commit for the Florida Gators. That, again, he is another player that wasn't supposed to take an official visit or wasn't supposed to take a visit to Florida this past weekend. He was supposed to be at Texas, canceled that visit to take an unofficial to Florida. And it felt like for many people that it was Florida or Texas as the final two. And so for him to cancel the Texas one and come to Florida was a pretty telling sign of what was going to happen with his recruitment. Quarterback Will Griffin, who's been committed to Florida for over a year now, he was also on campus for his official visit this past weekend, 4-star everywhere. And he did tweet on, I think it was Friday, first and only official visit of the cycle. He has been very consistent with not taking visits elsewhere. He's been all Florida all the time since he committed on June 1st, 2024. He's been all Gator. And after the visits, he did an interview with On3 and mentioned that he thinks Florida has a real shot at offensive lineman Desmond Green, at offensive lineman Claude Mpouma, tight end Carson Sneed, who is currently committed to Tennessee, and linebacker Malik Morris. We will talk about all four of those players in a couple minutes here, but to stick on Will Griffin here for a second, Will Griffin being on campus is huge. I know that there are a lot of people who maybe expected him to be there more, but there are other things that go on in life than being a high school kid who's still going into your senior year and coming here to recruit incessantly. Like DJ Lagway did it, but DJ Lagway is a standard like no other. Will Griffin, I still think he's a very good quarterback. We did the scouting report about a week or so ago. I'm going to start releasing those in just individual videos as well, just for the scouting report to be available there. But Will Griffin, I think him being on campus is big. I know that Florida didn't land, again, like I mentioned, I know a lot of people thought Florida would land more commits this weekend after the 1 on Friday, 2 on Saturday. That didn't happen, but that doesn't make this weekend any less important, right? Like you still made significant progress. And I sent a message to the Insider program on, I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, but saying that while, like, even if Florida doesn't get more commits, you're going to have kids leave campus and say, hey, Florida's my new number one. And in the coming weeks, you're going to find out really who from these visits is committed to Florida, whether or not they moved up their deadline, their commitment timeline, whatever it may be. This is still a very successful weekend, in my opinion, right now for the Florida Gators for this 2026 recruiting class as they turn their attentions a bit more to 2027. We are going to talk about the offensive visitors that were on campus this weekend with Locked On Gators when we get back in just a second. There's nothing quite like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you kind of want to experience live. I would have loved to experience the finals live, but the Knicks didn't exactly make it, and so that sucks. But if you want to go to a game near you, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get tickets for all sports, comedy, theater, music. You got everything. I mean, I think in the past year I've used Game Time, I want to say 12 times in the past 12 months. Maybe 10. In that range. Just saying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Next week at Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And we're going to go, when we talk about these players, we're going to go in the same order we spoke about them on Friday's preview show for Locked On Gators. So A lot of this is by ranking. First up is tight end Kaden Prothrow. He's a 4-star everywhere, except he's a 5-star on ESPN. He has an official visit set with Texas next week. I'm torn on this one because he said that he expects to commit. I think it was in July still is when he's expecting to commit. He said that Georgia and Florida are his top 2 right now. Myself and many others think that Georgia is leading there. Rightfully so, right? I mean, if you're a tight end that could be used as a pass catcher, Florida hasn't shown you much since Dan Mullen left that they're going to throw to the tight ends consistently, right? And so that can change this year, but for the time being, if you're a tight end that wants to be involved in the passing game, it's perfectly fair if you're a bit skeptical of being actually involved in the game plan there. But it felt like going into this visit that Georgia and Auburn were in the lead, and then Florida visit happens, and now it's Georgia and Florida in the lead, and then Texas has the OV next week. Is it going to be Georgia and Texas? Like, is it just Georgia and then 2 through 5 or 2 through 4 is just muddied up? But I guess I said this on Friday that with Kaden Prothrow, he's a damn good player that I think regardless of where he commits, when he commits, it's going to come down to signing day. I don't think he's going to be the type to shut it down fully, even if he says he is. I don't think that's going to happen. Wide receiver Davian Gross, a 4-star everywhere. Florida and Oklahoma visits are done. He is set to visit Baylor next week, which we'll see what happens with that one. But he also said that Florida is in his top 3 with Oklahoma and Baylor. This was his first time on campus. We know that Florida really put a ton of, I don't want to say pressure. I don't like saying pressure. But that they prioritized Davian Gross this week and trying to make sure that was a great experience for him. He said that he's going to commit sometime in July, so we'll see what happens there. But Florida in his top 3 there, his first visit on campus, probably his last visit on campus. They made a great impression in that time. And that's why they had to prioritize making sure his experience this weekend was great, because this is probably going to be the only time he's on campus. And so you really got to make sure that, hey, he had a great experience on campus and hope that it continues that way if he commits to Florida. Offensive tackle Claude Mpouma, I think that's how it's pronounced. He's a 4-star everywhere. He plans on committing sometime in the next few weeks. That could be, it's June 16th presently. Maybe that's June 25th that he's going to commit. Maybe it's July 23rd. Who knows? But we know that he said Florida is his new number 1. Florida, Auburn, and Nebraska are the only OVs, so it's fair to assume that those are the final 3. And Nebraska's visit is next week. But again, him saying Florida is number 1 could mean a lot, could mean nothing, right? If Nebraska's his next week visit, is Nebraska going to be number 1 after that visit? Is he going to come out of that visit still saying Florida's number 1? Because at this point, I think a lot of people thought Auburn was number 1 there after getting the last OV. Now he goes to Florida, and Florida's the new OV. It's just going to be recency. Whoever's the most recent OV or most recent visit in general is the spot, or is Florida the true number 1 in this recruitment? That's going to be an interesting thing to see how it plays out, and we'll be keeping track of that after the Nebraska visit, especially because Florida doesn't have any OVs for the 2020, or Florida doesn't have any OVs for the 2026 class this coming weekend. And so one thing I think we're going to do is try to track where targets are visiting and how those recruitments might be shaping up as we get into the summer here. Interior offensive lineman Chris Booker is an Alabama commit. He's a 4-star on On3 and Rivals, a 3-star on 24/7 and ESPN. And Florida made significant progress in this recruitment in recent weeks. But again, he's still got the Bama visit next weekend. So even if he made significant progress, did you make enough to keep his head turned a bit? Because this is one that I said I think it's going to come down for a bit unless Bama gets him to shut it down next week. I think it gets shut down next week, or it's going to go to signing day. We know, and I messaged the insiders about this. I forgot what day this weekend. It was just a blur, right? Like, that's why I've always said, you're going to get on average like 3 messages a day in the insider program. Sometimes you're not going to get any. Sometimes you're going to get 13. It just goes nuts there. but the staff views Chris Booker as his center. So if he does reaffirm his commitment with Alabama, I'd be interested to see if the Gators spin the block on Bla1 Thomas, who committed to Stanford last week. But we also know that when he took his OV to Florida a few weeks ago, that we know Florida was big time in the lead there, but that he wasn't a take at the moment. And so I'd be interested if Chris Booker does stay with Alabama. Will Florida go back to Bla1 Thomas? Is he shut down after committing to Stanford? What would it be there? But this could be. They seem like they're looking for a big O-line class, right? Like they seem like they're looking to take like 6 guys here in the O-line. Which hell, I'm cool with it. You need bodies in there, you need talent in there. Go get more. Tight end Carsyn Baker is someone that I mentioned earlier that one of the players Will Griffin views as a realistic get. 3-star on On3 and 24/7, 4-star on ESPN and Rivals. Tennessee commit, and similar to Chris Booker, Carsyn Baker's last official visit is going to be to his current commit spot of Tennessee. So I don't know if he made enough progress to keep his head turned again after the Tennessee visit or what, but I would expect Florida, if he doesn't shut it down after the Tennessee OV, I would expect Florida to try to get him back on campus unofficially sometime before signing day and try to make another impression. Maybe for the Tennessee game. It's in Gainesville this time. And Florida, it's a ballsy thing to do, but if you can get someone to, like, if you can get a Tennessee commit to come visit for the Tennessee game and you beat them, that's huge. Of course, it's a risky move because if you lose, then that's definitely not going to work in your favor. But we could see what happens with that one. Interior offensive lineman Desmond Green is, I think, a name that a lot of people were hoping would pop up this past weekend. Didn't happen. 3-star everywhere except he's a 4-star on Rivals. Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, and then there's a visit with South Carolina next weekend. That's his last OV. He's committing on June 26th. And from what I was told, the visit went really well. Florida put a lot of emphasis on him, put priority on him as well. And there's confidence inside the facility that they'll be able to make some moves with Desmond Green and hopefully be able to land him on June 26th when he announces his commitment. The last offensive player to talk about is certainly not the least. Offensive tackle Tyler Chukuyem, 4-star on 3-star on 24/7, unranked on ESPN and Rivals, which important to note here, 4-star on 3, great, right? 3-star on Rivals, not great, but they update their rankings next week, so could make some progress there. Unranked on ESPN and Rivals, clearly that is just more about them not having updated rankings rather than him actually being unranked, because it's very rare that someone's a 4-star on one service and ends completely unranked on the other services. He's a 6'6", 290-pound offensive tackle that's been getting power forward love lately, and it's an interesting recruitment, right? I've said before, like I think that no matter what happens, this one can drag out into the season because he's committing today. He's committing sometime this afternoon / early evening. Final 4 is Florida, Florida State, Cincinnati, and Ole Miss. And he said education's really important to him. I would imagine that Florida puts himself in a great spot with that one. Florida, I think honestly right now, I feel like Florida might be leading for him, so he will be going live if he commits to the Florida Gators today. But Florida could add 2 offensive linemen today. Tyler Chukuyem commits today, and also offensive tackle Javari Lucas, who we've spoken about multiple times, commits today as well. If Florida can walk away with both of them, first off, we'll be going live for both of them. But 2, that would give Florida 4 offensive line commits already, which is the earliest they've had that, and they'd be just beaten on the trail right now. They're on fire, and if you could add 2 more guys, I think that'll supplement not landing one on Saturday. But yeah, we got 5 guys in the past 3 days. Fine, 4 days. 5 guys in the past 4 days. Huge for recruiting. We're going to flip to the defensive side where Florida could have made some pretty significant progress this weekend. We'll talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we're talking about the defensive visitors from this past weekend of official visits. First off is defensive lineman James Johnson. He's a 4-star everywhere. It's Florida, Miami, it's Georgia. He's got an official visit set with Georgia for next week, which we've spoken about this before. Never a comforting thing to know that you got a defensive lineman and Georgia has the OV after you, right? That's never a good sign, never a comforting sign, because even if you went out there and you were like, hey, we nailed it this weekend, we crushed it, we made him feel like a priority, we sold him on the program, we sold him on all these things, doesn't matter sometimes with Georgia. They do a damn good job recruiting, right? I mean, they're up there as the best or one of the best recruiting staffs in the country for damn good reason. I think we'll get a decision in July. There's been no date set. He hasn't said it, but I think we'll get a decision in July from James Johnson here. Linebacker Isaiah Williams, I mentioned this last week, permanent flip watch here for every school he visits. I have said before that I truly think that he's one of those off-ball linebackers that just might be best suited to move to edge full-time. And again, I feel like people think that's me saying that he can't play off-ball linebacker, and that's that's rarely what I mean here. Like with the Darius Hayes, I thought it was. I thought that he didn't have the foot speed and the agility to move in space like an off-ball linebacker. With Isaiah Williams, it's just he's got insane size and length and insane burst. Let me get that on the edge and let me teach him technique and let me make him even better there. So that's how I think of Isaiah Williams there. But he's got an official visit set with Colorado in the middle of this coming week. He's going to be at Florida State this weekend. And who knows what's going on, right? Like I want to say that Colorado and Florida State probably shouldn't be looked at as legit spots right now for him. But it's been all over the place. And the only thing we ever know with this recruitment is that it's never over. Again, like when he flipped from Florida to Ole Miss, his representation put out, hey, we didn't know that was happening. Like that's what they put out. And so for his representation to publicly say, hey, we didn't know what was happening, kind of makes me think he's just kind of moving like a kid, right? Which again, he is a kid. That's what grand scheme of things. These are kids deciding where they're going to play college football. Edge rusher Trenton Henderson, 4-star everywhere except for a 5-star on 24/7. And what was huge here was that he came out of this weekend saying Florida is now number 1 and LSU is now number 2. He has a visit set with Texas for next week, which if you go back to the Friday show, I said, hey, he's going to visit next week with USC. And I feel good about that. And then that USC visit is now canceled because it's a Texas visit. And I feel less good about that. There's a lot of kids who, when they go to USC, I kind of think, even if they commit there, I don't expect it to stick. Because we see that happen all the time with USC. Kids commit and it's like, oh, I talk trash. I was going to say talk something else with our USC host all the time, where he's like, oh, yeah, the number 1 recruiting class in the country. And it's like, yeah, for now, you guys were amazing last year too. And then it all fell to crap. It's going to happen again probably, especially if you lose games here. Come on now. So I'm not super concerned about USC right now. Even if someone commits there, I don't expect them to stay. However, Texas, different story. My hope personally is that Florida can just contact Trenton Henderson every day and say, hey, let's get this done. Like put more pressure. I know that Florida Billy Napier staff is not known for doing that. But, sometimes you got to give a little to what you don't want to do in certain things. And it's not compromising your morals of not wanting to pressure a kid. It's that, hey, this is recruiting. If this were flipped, if it was Texas as number 1 with Florida in the mix and Florida OV next week, Texas would be going, hey, man, come on, just come in. Let's shut it down for a bit. So I'm going to hope that Florida can get him to commit before the Texas visit, 1. 2, even if you don't get him to commit before the Texas visit, speak with him every day and let him know that there's a lot of love in Gainesville for him. Or 3, get him back on campus for an unofficial visit as quickly as possible after that Texas visit. Because we've always talked about this, where the last visit always has the advantage. Because recency bias, that's the one you sit with. If I take my final OV of the summer right now to Florida, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not committing until October, and I don't take any other visits between now and then, that's the one that I'm going to sit with that's going to sit freshest in my mind. So if I'm Florida, I'm saying, hey, let's get you for an unofficial as soon as possible after that Texas visit, and let's get the recency bias back in our favor. Because he said he's going to commit whenever it feels right, which at this point could be at any point. And if you can make him feel like it's right before that Texas visit and get him to cancel that one, that's great. Defensive lineman Kendall Gerville, a 4-star everywhere. After the visit, he said Texas was still number 1 for him. He has an OV to Texas next weekend. Hell, he might commit to Texas next weekend, but he also said that he plans on waiting until December for a decision. So I'm assuming that means signing day-ish is when he plans on committing there. And I will say that regardless of what happens, and look, I'm not saying that he's going to commit to Texas next week. I'm just saying, you tell me Texas is your number 1, or not me personally, but you say Texas is your number 1, and then you're taking an OV to Texas next week. Texas did a good job of closing, right? They're a great recruiting program as well. But I do think that even if he does commit to Texas, it ain't over till it's over. Pen hits paper in December. And that's another thing where, some of the insiders brought this up, which, by the way, if you want to join the insider program, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators, or the link is in the description below. But we spoke about this where a lot of people are starting to feel maybe uneasy about the defensive line class because Valvin Sone hasn't committed. JJ Perez, there's a ton of news about JJ Perez having a great visit with Ohio State. You didn't land on some of the names that were here this weekend, but due time, right? Like some of these aren't going to work out. Some of these guys aren't the priority, but Florida trying to make some stuff happen. And again, I think that Florida is going to still come away with a good defensive line haul, regardless of how people may feel at this moment. The last player is linebacker Malik Morris, 4-star everywhere. Florida feels really good about the visit from what I was told. Miami and Texas are in it as well, but I still think it's Florida's race to lose here. He has a visit with Colorado during this coming week and Missouri this coming weekend. Expected to commit again within a month and a half, I say. I would expect that decision to come by the end of July. I still think it's Florida's race to lose. Would have been awesome. He was on commit watch for this weekend. I thought that it was very possible that he'd announce his decision and commit to the Florida Gators. But it ain't over till it's over, and Florida's trending. Florida's leading right now. Keep hammering away, keep chipping away, keep taking that lead. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back, hopefully, twice later today. Hopefully. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all of my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.